Welcome. Thanks for tuning into The Good Nurse Outlook, a podcast about life from a nurse's point of view. But if you're not a nurse, that's okay too. Not only will I discuss things nursing and healthcare related, but everyday matters as well. Honestly, the topics are endless. I'm your host, Nurse Naj. Let's get into it. Hey, you guys. Welcome to the Good Nurse Outlook podcast. I've been away for a while. I felt so guilty, I will say. I think it's been like 3 weeks since I've recorded an episode. So in that time, let me just catch you up on things that have been going on. Welcome if you are new. I had a book launch. Well, I already had a book launch. I had a book signing at my local hospital. That was great. However, Joint Commission actually showed up on that day. So it was, sales ain't sell, but people did come out and support, and I appreciated that. I will be doing another book signing during Nurses Week, so I'm very excited about that. What episode are we on? Y'all, don't judge me. It's been a little minute. I'm like a hot mess express. I think we're on episode 8. No, maybe so. Hot, no, 9. We are on episode 9. Welcome to the Good Nurse Outlook podcast. We're on episode 9. Oh my gosh. Let me stop. I've just been like getting things in order. On today's episode, I want to talk about nurse abuse. Recently, last week, I was at work. Oh my gosh, I got verbally abused so bad. And it wasn't even like by one patient. I work in the ER. So at a certain point in the ER, doctors stop seeing patients, and the patients just wait until next shift. So it was like an influx of patients, and they were all screaming at me, calling me out my name. I was an MFer, a B word, a stupid nurse, everything but the N word, honey. And I'm sure some people said it in their mind, but it was like really raunchy. And I was the only nurse on the unit, like in that area. I work at a level 1 trauma center, and the doctors all went to a trauma. They were like the backup doctors, and it got so crazy. They went to the next trauma. The nurse that was working with me, she had to pump, and it's 6 o'clock. I'm like, ma'am, don't leave me here with these people. She left. And then the team leader who was with me, she left too. So literally, I was the only nurse in this nursing station. And we have like a little shield, like a plastic shield, but there's still like openings where people walk in and walk out. So like patients were like yelling at me. This one guy, oh my gosh, I will never forget it. Because he like was like, you need to put me on a stretcher right now. Da 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 da. And then one person was like, oh, it was just, I don't even want to relive it, but it was crazy. And the fact that they all like were ganging up on me and there was nothing I could do, honey, I was just like, you know what? I walked away. Like, I just left. I just was like, I can't deal with this. How am I mean, it was so bad, y'all. Like, they had to figure it out. I know it's like, so bad you left patients. They weren't that sick. I wasn't like in a critical zone. And it was just so much. Like, if you have enough strength and energy to come to the nurse's station and curse the nurse out like a dog, honey, like, it was like 4 or 6 of them, and they just started feeding off of each other. Like, that could have escalated into something so crazy. And I'm just the only person there. There was a clerk who watched everybody yell at me. One thing I can say about healthcare, like, I'm seeing more and more, like, less people are getting involved when there's conflict. Less people are trying to intervene and help. And I just don't think that's right. Like, I don't think that's fair, because many times I've seen providers or other nurses see nurses get attacked verbally, and like they'll just stay out of it. Oh, not my patient, not my problem. And that's not right. Today's episode is just discussing nurse abuse and like the things that we go through as nurses. And then we go through this abuse, and who can we vent to? Because if you go talk to management, management will try to flip it and say like, oh, well, what did you do wrong? If something happens where like a patient assaults you or something like that, the patient's not held responsible. You as the nurse, you're held responsible. Management will be like, well, what could you have done to make it different? Probably write you up, discipline you. Even you've done nothing. You've said nothing back to the patient. You just took the assault or the abuse. They would just not have your back. Very few incidents, like I could count on my hand, where a provider or another nurse, well, nurses, I will say, tend to stick up for each other for the most part and be like, but there will be providers or management that would just watch it happen until it escalates to like something crazy. And I just feel like that's not right. Nurse violence is on the rise. You could say it factors from many things, such as like mental health is on the rise. But still, like, that's not a excuse for nurse violence. The thing I feel like in healthcare, patients treat nurses like they're not human. Like we don't have feelings. Like we are supposed to just take the abuse and then keep moving. And if we react as nurses, then we risk losing our job, losing our license. And it's just like, how is that fair? Where do we go from here? You feel so tied up. There's a study showing how nurses are leaving the bedside and how it's predicted almost 1 million nurses will be needed by 2027. So it states that by 2027, nearly 900,000 registered nurses are expected to leave the workforce, roughly a fifth of the current workforce. That's a lot of people. And a lot of nurses are leaving bedside and they're saying, like, oh, there's a nursing shortage. Who wants to be abused when they go to work? In most places, there's no support for nurses. I'm a travel nurse and I work in the ER. The ER nurses are the punching bags, like where they start off. Being an ER nurse, I'm sure contributes to most of the physical abuse, mental abuse, verbal abuse. We see the patients first. We see them at their worst. You ever try to Narcan a patient who's on drugs and then you Narcan and get them off that high? How they come at you? Shh, please. Like, yeah. Joint Commission found workers in healthcare settings are 4 times more likely to be assaulted than workers in a private industry. I'm not surprised. I'm just hitting y'all with facts, but if you're a nurse and you work in the field, you're going to be like, okay, I can see that. I can see that. This podcast, this episode is going to be you as a nurse saying, I can see that. I can see that. Because these stats are not surprising to us. We're at the bedside. We're experiencing this. I had like this bad verbal abuse that happened to me, and it really affects you. And it's easy to be like, oh, don't take that home with you. But like, what if that verbal abuse escalated to like physical harm? And I'm just the only staff member there. And somehow it would have been flipped to it would have been my fault or my problem. And there's so many nurses and they try to cover it up or hide it or whatever the case is that report abuse and nothing happens. So with nurse abuse, the most common nurse abuse that I've personally seen and based on my research is verbal abuse, but nurses also encounter physical abuse. Like I said earlier, like no one intervenes for the nurse, no one jumps in. And I know that's not the case in all situations, but most of the time, the nurse, she doesn't feel comfortable even saying something. It always gets flipped back around to like what she could have done as the nurse to prevent that from happening. Different type of verbal abuse can be yelling, screaming, shouting, threatening, intimidation, insulting, name calling, blaming, scapegoating, talking to the nurse like they're a child, from patients stating, they read this on Google or they have a family member who's in healthcare calling you out your name. And it just brings me back to that study that like they're going to need almost 1 million nurses. Where are the resources for the nurse? So, according to a Press Ganey analysis from 2022, on average, 57 nurses are assaulted every day in the United States. That's 2 nurses attacked every hour. Where are the laws? I just feel so helpless because I don't know what to do. Like, it's so hard and probably has something to do with nursing being predominantly women. And, many people don't. I'm going to just leave it there. Some of the examples of like patients, not only like verbal abuse and physical abuse, but they will harm themselves to get you in trouble or to like prove a point. It's bizarre. I had a patient threaten to sign out AMA. Like, sir, I hate to say it, but you're not hurting my feelings. Like, I will try to convince you to stay, but if you're going to sign out AMA or I'm going to hit you or something, like some type of assault, I'm going to let you sign out. I'm not stopping you. Like, that's the provider's role at that point. Or rip their IVs out. Oh my gosh, I cannot stand when a patient, just because they don't like what you said, maybe you told them no to a turkey sandwich or told them that they were NPO, so they got angry and they ripped their IV out. And that, again, that falls on the nurse, on the public. Nurses are held to such a high standard, but then we're treated like servants in the profession. We have professional degrees, and sometimes we're treated like, I don't know, like we bought our degree offline or something. I don't really know. And not only that, you can bring this up to management and they'll be like, nursing is customer service. They'll tell you to fix your issue and your problem. You have to be more friendlier. You have to be kind. You have to smile. You have to do everything that they want. It's all about customer service. It can be so hard to like have compassion, try to be the best version of yourself and try to give the patient the best care when like you're not getting that in return. Many people don't even speak on verbal abuse or any type of abuse, assault, or anything because it's like I'm repeating myself, but it all trickles down to like if you do say something, there has been times where I've made complaints and then management has done nothing about it, dismissed it, or just tried to flip it back on me and to see like, oh well, what could you have done different in that situation? When situations do arise, altercation between patient and nurse, no one intervening, right? The patient can go a step further to record, and the nurse can say like, oh please don't record me. But imagine roles reversed. If the nurse pulled out her phone, she would be held, oh this is HIPAA. And I know, like, I think this podcast is just me venting. I know if someone could listen and be like, oh well, nurses need to have conduct. Well, you know what, we also need a place to vent, and we need a place where we can just let this out. It needs to be like in a community of nurses, not only like therapy or with your spouse at home or your nurse friends. Sometimes you can be going through something related to work and you don't want to bring that home. And then you try to talk to another coworker about it, but they don't want to hear it because they want to just pretend that they never happened. So then you're like stuck in a difficult situation. And it just really ultimately comes down to like being unfair. And I always try to like use my voice, my experience is positive, and I just try to be very positive, optimistic, and encourage people in the field. But sometimes it's too much. And honestly, you feel like no matter what happens or how it's flipped, the nurse will always be wrong in the situation if she reacts, or if she entertains it, or if she reacts, or she has to risk losing her job or worse, her license. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, approximately 75% of nearly 25,000 workplace assaults are reported annually. And again, are you really surprised? So I work in the ER, and I don't want to say we always get assaulted, but we see a lot of assault on staff members. Some of the jobs do offer panic buttons where you keep a button on you and you push it, and then security will come to you wherever you are. But sometimes by that time, it could be too late if you're alone or by yourself. And that's why it's always important to make sure that you're in your position and it sounds so crazy to even have to say this, but just position yourself to where you can't be cornered in. You're always close to an exit. Nothing harmful that can be used as a weapon is like near you. You have to try to make your environment safe for you, but also think about how you're going to escape a certain situation. And I don't think that's talked about enough. This field, I think a lot of people just highlight the good of nursing, like, oh, the money, which depending on where you work, it's not much. Glamorizing travel nursing and glamorizing little memes where patients do crazy things and you chart will continue to monitor. It's just all laughable. It's like we have a sick and twisted humor. And it's just like we've been beaten down so bad, in my opinion. And we're just like, if you can't beat them, join them. And that's unfortunate. So some things that can help is that hospitals, they need to adopt codes of conduct. Some hospitals across Massachusetts have agreed to enforce new codes of conduct to help shield healthcare workers from the growing threat of violence and abuse from patients. The new policies will ban violence as well as offensive, abusive, and discriminatory language and behavior. Any patient who violates the rules could be asked to leave and seek care elsewhere. Clap it up for the hospitals in Massachusetts. This needs to be something worldwide. Patients can verbally, physically, etc., abuse nurses, and there are no consequences to it. And like that's the most upsetting part of this whole situation. ANA, they have this hashtag in nurse abuse where they state 1 in 4 nurses are abused in some type of way by patients. There was an article in nurse.org. It was from a nurse named Angela Simpson who was attacked by a dementia patient. Article is very informative, and some of the gems that I took away and I want to share with you guys are she gave 6 steps nurses should take after being attacked. I know, like, just stick with me, just stick with me. I know some nurses are listening to this like, I wish a patient would listen. I'm I'm not trying to manifest nothing, but let me say I've been assaulted, like physically assaulted, and I had to go to the ER because I had my lip busted by a patient. You know, they wanted me to work still. They were like, oh, just give her Motrin and she can come back upstairs. And it's not like you can sue the patient. Like, they'll be like, oh, the patient had dementia. They didn't know what they were doing. And, you know, I had to get a tetanus shot, ice, and told me to just, oh, you'll be fine tomorrow. So 6 steps nurses should take after being attacked. I don't like how it's written. Why you gotta be attacked? Let's see. So, number one, try to escape. If you can't escape, yell loud enough to get help. Number two, create a barrier. Put something between that person assaulting you and yourself so you might be able to escape. Number three, defend yourself. You can defend yourself. You are allowed to meet the attacker with equal force to get them to stop. Some people don't know that. I've seen nurses attack the patient. If there are no supervisors or anybody around, then maybe they could get away with that. But I never seen like somebody with authority around to witness the assault and nothing happened to the nurse. No, like no. Number four, report the incident. Notify your facility of the assault because that goes so far. Okay, now just stop being mean. Ugh, sorry. It just ticks me off, man. Number five, take a leave of absence. Many people be nervous to go back to work after an incident. If you are struggling emotionally with trauma, people need to begin to realize that trauma and anxiety are legitimate reasons to get leave of absence. Don't rush back to work if you aren't ready. And number six, get support and seek help. Surround yourself with people that you trust. Consider getting trauma counseling. Ms. Simpson, she also encouraged everyone to reach out to their state representatives to demand better laws protecting healthcare workers. The legislature proposing the following: assault against any healthcare worker must be a felony. No less than 2 law enforcement officers must be present with offenders. Facilities must provide locator badges with panic buttons for victims to signal for help. There must be anti retaliation protections in place so healthcare workers may receive the same basic rights as any other assault victim, the right to report to law enforcement. And that I totally agree to, because the moment you as a nurse want to state the assault that has happened to you, management is going to flip it, or you're going to be seen in a different light. It's just really disgusting, to be honest. I just feel so speechless. And I think my experience with like the verbal abuse that I've been receiving lately on this new travel assignment, I have 4 weeks left and I'm not going back. And you can try to factor it into like, oh, you know, well, these people are mentally ill or they're sick. Sick as in drug seeking sick and stuff like that. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's right. I don't feel like nurses should be punching bags. I feel like the compassion, care that nurses offer patients, nurses should be met with the same respect that they give. And they should definitely have support and be backed by management and also other providers, especially in close proximity. Not all the time, but most of the time, you're not backed by anyone. It's just the nurse versus the patient, and and it shouldn't even be that way. But it's just like the patient can become so aggressive and in the nurse's face, and the fact that people just want to look away and kind of just be like, "Well, they're not dealing with me," or "Ugh, I just don't want to get involved." Like, the culture needs to change. I'm hoping that it becomes better. I would love to have come on this podcast talking about something bright and, you know, highlighting and just being so full of life. But this is just one of those real episodes where it's like, this is what's going on. This is where I'm at right now. And, you know, things are going to get better for sure. The more abuse you take, you kind of become numb to it being abuse. And I don't want that to happen for me. It's a good thing nurses just work most nurses just work 3 days a week because it's just not healthy. Sorry for sounding so down. Thank you guys so much for just tuning in, being loyal, being consistent. Something I need to work on is being consistent. Also, I understand mental health breaks and I find that very important. And that's why I've been gone. I just been like trying to get myself together. And it could be a lot. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram, TikTok, nurse.naj. You can also catch me on YouTube, nurse.naj, if you're not watching visual. And comment on the episode, leave likes or a review. Let me know what you think. leave some kind words, rate the show. God bless you. Bye.